the drugs were changing my heart and my mind. So mentally and emotionally, I wasn't functioning anymore. Wound up in a bed just every day, all day, just unable really to face the day.
Welcome to another edition of Recovery Happens. I'm Patrick Patterson with BW Rock. This month we celebrate 1 year of Recovery Happens. That's 1 year of telling people stories, 1 year of reducing the stigma of addiction, and 1 year of offering hope to encourage recovery. Where we've reached an audience of over 250,000 people, we want to thank each and every one of you. Today we're going to be sitting down with Chris as he offers hope to encourage recovery.
I am from St. Clair. I graduated in 1983. I'm about to turn 55, so that's a few years ago. I came out of a really stable home, loving Christian home. We didn't have a whole lot of money. My dad he had his own business, reupholstering furniture. And I think if you were to go back and look at his situation, I know he would be probably diagnosed with clinical depression. He would go days and weeks without doing any work. So that led to a lot of stress and struggle over financial issues. And while we never lost the house, there was always foreclosure notices on the door. And I only mention that because it really does play a part in what happened for me later on in life. So, well, I came up with some medical issues when I was about 40 years old. Just through a bad series of operations, I wound up being really disabled. And it was through that I began taking the opioids, which it was all prescribed, but it took me on a stair-step journey where it started with just a little bit of Vicodin, then they would prescribe more, and then a little bit more, and then we wound up with fentanyl. And I wore a fentanyl patch for about 5 years and was taking the Vicodin too. And it was at the point where I had to step away from teaching, is when I realized that this has taken over my life. And I pretty much lost everything that was my identity as a husband, as a father, as a teacher, as a community, I won't say activist, but involved in my community, involved in my church. And that stuff was all taken away. Where I realized that the physical limitations that I had kept me maybe from doing physical things. The drugs were changing my heart and my mind, so mentally and emotionally, I wasn't functioning anymore. Wound up in a bed just every day, all day, just unable really to face the day. And that was the point I realized, something's got to change. You have a major problem here. I count on my church family a lot, and I was very honest with them all the way through this, that I was having a problem. And there were a lot of people that I counted on that we talked about. I needed accountability for being able to get off of the drugs, but my situation was a little bit different in that I couldn't just go to a regular rehab. I had to have something that would help me deal with the pain that was left over after getting off the drugs. And there just isn't a lot around for that. Found something at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, but that would have cost a lot of money because I would have had to live out there for a month. I wouldn't be able to just have it paid for by insurance. And then through a really interesting set of circumstances that surround my son playing baseball, we wound up out in Omaha, Nebraska, and I just wound up in a man's living room that was able to provide the help that I needed. He worked for a major railroad, and as he heard my story, he stepped up and said, hey, we're trying to create a program just like that in Texas. And if you'll let me be your advocate, I'll step forward and I'll make sure this happens for you. You don't have to worry about a thing. I'll set the whole thing up and we'll make sure it gets paid for you. So I went off to Texas to go to rehab. The rehab experience really changed everything for me. And the honest truth is I really felt that my situation was different than what I deemed as an addict. And in fact, socially, a lot of people wanted to give me a pass because my addiction grew out of a physical pain that was treated with prescription drugs, and I hadn't crossed any lines. And so a lot of people, including me, I kind of wanted to give myself a pass on that. And I realized as I was in rehab that it was about the fourth day of my detox that I stood there in a dark room and realized that I would have done anything to get my drugs back to take away that pain. And as I spent that time in rehab and interacted with other people, I realized that their stories were just like mine. The only difference was I wasn't pushed to that point where I had to seek those drugs elsewhere. I didn't have a doctor who had come along and said, we're cutting you off. But I realized at that moment, if anybody had cut me off, I would have done anything to be able to relieve that pain. And so it opened my eyes to the idea that it doesn't really matter how it starts. It's going to take you down a road of destruction. And so I decided at that point, I really wanted to do something that would help other people. And really a big thing for me, Patrick, is the stigma that goes along with it. As a teacher for 25 years in the Port Huron area, I had a lot of respect from a lot of people. I was well respected by administration, by colleagues, by parents, by kids. And for me to stand up and admit that I was on drugs while I was teaching those kids, it was a difficult thing to do. But I went over to the high school and I spoke to kids a couple different times. And the first question I would ask would be, what's your impression of somebody who continues to take drugs? And generally the answers would be that they lack character, that they're selfish, and that they're weak. And then I would admit to these kids, many of whom I had go through my own classroom, that I had made that decision too. And it kind of blew that stigma out of the water for them that, wow, this could happen to anybody. If it could happen to my teacher like that, it could happen to anybody. And that's what I really hope for people, is that they understand that while my problem was a physical pain, the legitimacy of the other people who have a mental or emotional pain is the exact same. They're just doing whatever they have to do to relieve that pain, whether it's the trap of something that happened to them as a child, or something even that's happening to them because of their choices with the drugs. Many times they're choosing to go back to that because they're overwhelmed with the pain and they need to be out of it. And it's no different than my own situation where I was choosing to have those drugs so I would be out of physical pain. It's no different than anybody else's choice to be out of pain. My life today is somewhat different. I do miss the teaching. I miss that connection with the kids on an everyday basis. And really the physical things that I deal with still today, they keep me from being able to do some of the things I'd really like to do. So I found that in order to have success, I needed to set goals for myself every day. And those goals started really small at first. I was happy when I could get out of bed and make my bed. I would make the bed as a symbol of saying, I'm not getting back in that bed today. I'm going to make that bed and I'm going to walk away. The next thing was make the bed and walk the dogs. And just gradually I've been adding things to that to be able to overcome the emptiness of doing that, of not having the teaching. My kids are all grown up. In fact, I just found out I'm going to be a grandfather ×2 this year. So, my kids are gone. I'm not teaching, so I needed to fill that void with something, which I think is a really important part of recovery. And it's a part of our recovery that's incomplete at this point, because we take the people through that recovery process in the facility, but then they stick you back out into society. And it's been my experience that if you send them back out with a void there, they're going to fill the void back up, and they're going to fill it with something that's not positive. We have to help people plug into things that they're good at, things that are going to be fulfilling for them, things that are going to help them be able to fight that recovery at those dark moments. Realizing you do have value to somebody else, that's the most important weapon you have in that dark moment when you're standing there saying, I can't take this anymore, knowing somebody else is depending on you, that they need your service. I think that's a really important weapon to have.
What's been your biggest triumph or success since recovery happened to you?
I think being able to get out and share my message to people. I'm a man of faith, and there's a lot of really miraculous circumstances that surround me, even being able to get to rehab and being able to stand up and share that message with people, maybe help find something for people to fill that void with. I think it's so important that you are connected with people that can support you, friends that aren't going to drag you back into the old patterns, the old lifestyles, friends that are going to be able to encourage you and lift you up, and really put yourself in a situation where you can be of service to other people. And being able to fulfill those goals has been monumental for me. It's been a key part to my recovery.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Recovery Happens. My name is Patrick Patterson. I'm the Center Manager for Blue Water Recovery and Outreach Center, where our purpose is offering hope to encourage recovery. If you're suffering from addiction or you have a loved one suffering from addiction, please give us a call. If you'd like to donate to the cause of recovery, please visit our website and click on Donate. We want to thank our sponsor, Blue Water Area Churches.